Forget the Brazil you think you know. Forget the postcards. The endless Carnival, the thong bikinis on Ipanema Beach, the perfectly choreographed samba. Forget the easy, sun-drenched caricature sold to you in travel brochures, a smiling giant offering you nothing but sunshine and soccer. That Brazil exists. It is bright, and it is beautiful, a spectacle for the world. But it is a single, dazzling feather on a creature of immense, breathtaking, and sometimes terrifying complexity. It's the public face of a nation whose true soul is infinitely more intricate. We are taught to think of wild as a place, a jungle, an untamed frontier of tangled vines and exotic animals. But what if wild is also a state of being, a human condition, a collision of worlds fought within a single city block? What if it's a place where unimaginable wealth, protected by bulletproof glass and private security, is built in the shadow of profound poverty, where life is sustained by ingenuity and grit, where joy is not a luxury but a form of defiance, and sorrow is sung into the most beautiful, gut-wrenching music the world has ever known? What if the wildest place on earth isn't an empty wilderness, but a country of 215 million people living in a state of perpetual, vibrant, and often painful contradiction? This is the Brazil they don't show you. The Brazil that exists beyond the hotel lobby, beyond the curated safety of the guided tour. This is the real life pulsing beneath the postcard. This is Brazil in 2025, and it is far wilder, deeper, and more human than you can possibly imagine. To understand the Brazil of today, you first have to understand its ghosts. And its ghosts have names. This is a nation built on a scale that is difficult for the mind to hold. A country larger than the continental United States, holding over 60% of the world's largest rainforest. A single river system that carries more water than the next 7 largest rivers combined. It was born from the violent, tragic, and ultimately creative marriage of 3 continents. The indigenous peoples who had lived here for 10,000 years, with hundreds of languages and civilizations of their own. The Portuguese colonizers who arrived with swords, crosses, and an insatiable hunger for resources. And the more than 4 million enslaved Africans who were dragged here in chains, more than any other single destination in the Americas. A staggering number that represents nearly 40% of the entire transatlantic slave trade. That history is not in the past. It is not a closed chapter in a book. It is written on the skin of the people, in the 1,000 shades of brown and black and white. It is etched into the geography of the cities, determining who lives on the hill and who lives by the sea. It is the invisible force that shapes politics, economics, and who has a right to dream. It is the source of Brazil's deepest wounds and its most profound, explosive beauty. Our journey into the wild heart of Brazil begins where most tourists do, in the postcard itself. But we will not stay on the tourist path. We begin in the Cidade Maravilhosa, the marvelous city, Rio de Janeiro. This is the God's eye view. From up here, floating in the silent air, Rio de Janeiro is perfect, a seamless masterpiece of nature and humanity. Christ the Redeemer, arms outstretched in a permanent, concrete blessing. The granite domes of Sugarloaf and the Two Brothers Mountains rising like ancient gods from the sea. It's the view that sells the dream. But Brazil's reality is rarely seen from a distance. Its truth is not in the panorama. You have to get closer. You have to feel its heat, its noise, its friction. You have to come down to the ground. The first contradiction you must understand about Brazil, the one that defines its cities, is the unwritten law of social geography. It's the chasm between the asfalto and the morro, the asphalt and the hill. The asfalto is the world of the formal city, the beachfront avenues of Ipanema and Leblon, the gleaming office towers of Centro, the air-conditioned shopping malls where the price of a handbag could feed a family for a month. The world of law, of order, of property deeds, registered addresses, and the illusion of European modernity. The Morro is the hill, and on the hills of Rio, and in the sprawling peripheries of every major city in Brazil, live the other half. The communities the world knows by a single, loaded, and misunderstood word: favelas. The word favela is often translated as slum, And in the international imagination, it's a monolith of misery, a synonym for danger, drugs, and despair. A chaotic no-go zone where tourists get robbed and police helicopters circle overhead like vultures. And let's be devastatingly clear that Brazil exists. The violence is not a myth. It is a brutal, daily reality for millions. For decades, many of these communities were completely abandoned by the state, becoming territories controlled by heavily armed drug trafficking gangs, or more recently, paramilitary militias known as militias. The battles between factions, and between the gangs and a notoriously violent military police force, are real, and they have cost countless lives, predominantly the lives of young Black men. To pretend that danger doesn't exist here is just as naive as believing it's the only thing that exists. But to see only the violence, to define a community of millions by its most brutal pathologies, is to be willfully blind to the truth of what a favela actually is. It's like describing New York City by only talking about its prisons. Over 1.5 million people in Rio live in one of its nearly 1,000 favelas. That's more than 1 in 5 residents of the marvelous city. Nationally, it's over 11 million people, a population larger than Portugal's. These are not temporary shanty towns. They are permanent, multi-generational neighborhoods, cities within cities, each with its own identity, its own slang, its own rhythm, its own soul. They were born from a history of official exclusion. After the abolition of slavery in 1888, freed Afro-Brazilians were given no land, no support, no reparations, no path to integration into the formal economy. They, along with poor soldiers returning from internal conflicts like the Canudos War, and migrants from the drought-stricken Northeast, built their homes on the only land available: the steep, undesirable, landslide-prone hillsides that the formal city had rejected. What you're seeing is not a failure of people. It's a testament to their resilience in the face of a failing state. It's urban planning from the ground up, born of necessity, social solidarity, and sheer human will. Life here is lived on a different axis. The verticality of the favela shapes everything. There are few cars. The main arteries are navigated by an army of moto-taxis, whose drivers have a near superhuman, three-dimensional knowledge of the twisting, impossibly narrow alleyways, or becos, that form the community's circulatory system. This is a world built on a human scale. There is a powerful, almost tangible sense of community, an interdependence born from shared struggle and collective abandonment by the state. Doors are left open. A neighbor borrows a cup of sugar, and another helps mind the kids. When someone's roof leaks in a storm, others show up with tools and tarps to help patch it. This is the Brazil of the collective, a stark contrast to the fortified individualism of the gated communities of the Asfalto. It's a vibrant, innovative, and self-reliant circular economy, pulsing with barbershops, bakeries, clothing stores, and tech repair shops, a world of entrepreneurship the official statistics never see. This is a world that many tourists, and even many wealthy Brazilians living just a few hundred meters away, never see, and are taught to fear. As one local wisely put it, Rio doesn't need to be changed, it needs to be experienced. And experiencing it means embracing its entirety, the breathtaking light and the uncomfortable shadow. But the urban wild of Brazil is not confined to Rio. To truly grasp the scale and sheer force of the nation, you must travel 270 miles west, into the belly of the beast. This is Sao Paulo. If Rio is Brazil's beautiful, seductive, and often tragic face, Sao Paulo is its relentless, thumping, concrete heart. This is not a city that cares for your leisure. It's a city for work, for ambition, for survival. With over 12 million people in the city proper and nearly 22 million in the metropolitan area, it is a megalopolis, one of the largest cities on the planet. It's the undisputed economic engine of South America, responsible for over a third of Brazil's GDP. It's a city that never sleeps, because it literally cannot afford to. The wildness of Sao Paulo is not one of nature, but of pure, unadulterated capitalism and human density on a terrifying scale. It's a city of brutal ambition and Darwinian economics. The traffic, the famous transito, is legendary, a permanent state of near gridlock that consumes millions of hours of human life every single day. The noise is a constant companion, a symphony of engines, sirens, and 22 million human lives being lived at full volume. Here, the gap between rich and poor is just as stark as in Rio, but it manifests with a cold corporate efficiency. The wealthy don't just live in gated communities. They live in a parallel vertical dimension. They travel by helicopter to avoid the traffic, hopping between the helipads that crown their office buildings and luxury apartments. São Paulo has one of the largest fleets of private helicopters in the world. Imagine a city so choked by its own progress that the sky itself becomes a cordoned-off highway for the 1%. And just like in Rio, beyond the gleaming facade of wealth lies another, far larger reality. The periferia, the periphery. Vast, sprawling working-class neighborhoods that stretch for miles in every direction, dwarfing even Rio's favelas. Here, the challenge is not the steep hills, but the crushing, soul-destroying distance. A daily commute to a job in the city center can be a 3 or 4 hour odyssey, one way. A journey undertaken before dawn on a series of dangerously crowded buses and trains. Yet, it is from this periphery, from this high-pressure urban cooker, that much of Brazil's most vital contemporary culture is born. São Paulo's graffiti and street art scene, the famous Pichação, is world-renowned. A unique and controversial calligraphic style that turns the bleak concrete walls of the city into a vast, defiant, open-air gallery. São Paulo is the birthplace of Racionais MCs, Brazil's most influential and revered rap group, whose lyrics gave a voice to the voiceless, documenting the reality of racism and police violence in the margins with the poetic precision of war reporters. This is the city's raw, creative pulse, a powerful response to the concrete jungle that surrounds it. But to find the original soul of Brazil, the cultural DNA of the nation, you must leave the frenetic, European-influenced south and travel 2,000 kilometers northeast, back in time and into the heat. This is Salvador in the state of Bahia, the first capital of colonial Brazil, and the undisputed heart of Afro-Brazilian culture. If Rio's currency is beauty and São Paulo's is money, Salvador's is axé. It's a Yoruba word from West Africa that means life force, energy, power, spirit. And you don't just see it here, you feel it in your bones. More than 80% of Salvador's population identifies as having African ancestry. This is the blackest city in the world outside of Africa. It was here, in the port of Salvador, that millions of enslaved Africans first set foot in the New World, in the epicenter of the brutal sugar economy. They were stripped of their names, their families, their languages, their freedom, but they could not be stripped of their souls. In secret, forbidden by their Catholic masters on pain of torture or death, they kept their religions alive. They cleverly disguised their African deities, the Orishas, as Catholic saints who shared similar attributes. Iemanjá, the powerful mother goddess of the sea, was hidden behind the image of Our Lady of the Navigation. Ogum, the god of iron, technology, and war, was syncretized with the dragon-slaying Saint George. This act of spiritual genius gave birth to Candomblé, a complex and beautiful Afro-Brazilian religion that is now openly and proudly practiced. It's a living link to Africa. It's a powerful expression of cultural resistance that has endured for centuries against persecution. To witness a Candomblé ceremony, with its hypnotic drumming and trance-induced dances, is to witness history made manifest. A spiritual wildness that has refused to be tamed or erased. This spirit, this axé, infuses everything in Salvador. You taste it in the food, the acarajé, a humble-looking but deeply complex black-eyed pea fritter, fried in sizzling red palm oil, dendé, and stuffed with vatapá, shrimp, and chili sauce. It's a recipe that came directly from West Africa, a sacred food in Candomblé, an offering to the Orisha Iyansa, goddess of winds, storms, and the marketplace. Here, you can buy a piece of edible history on a street corner, prepared by Baiana women in their traditional white dresses, who are themselves priestesses of a sort. You see it in the movement. Capoeira, a breathtaking martial art disguised as a dance, developed by enslaved Africans to practice self-defense and combat techniques without their masters knowing. It's a physical conversation, a trickster's game of cunning, strength, and acrobatics, played within a circle, the roda, to the compelling rhythm of the single-string berimbau. It is the body made wild, fluid, and free. The cities of Brazil are a wilderness of brick, music, faith, and humanity. But beyond their borders, beyond the last streetlight and the final stretch of asphalt, lies a different kind of wild. A wildness of earth, water, and fire, the primordial force that shaped the continent. The Amazon. Amazonia. The name itself is mythical, a whisper of legend. It's not just a forest, it's a living, breathing entity the size of a continent, a green ocean. It is a weather system, creating the flying rivers of atmospheric moisture that provide rain for much of South America. It is a river that holds 1/5 of the world's flowing freshwater. A biological treasure chest so vast we still haven't identified all the species of plants, insects, and animals that live here. For most of the world, the Amazon is an abstraction, the lungs of the planet, an environmental slogan on a protest sign. But for the hundreds of indigenous peoples who call it home, it is simply the world, the source of all life. For thousands of years, hundreds of distinct indigenous cultures like the Yanomami, the Kayapo, and the Munduruku have lived in what they see as a symbiotic relationship with this forest. They are not just its residents, they are its gardeners, its guardians, its philosophers, its librarians, holding an encyclopedic, non-written knowledge of its medicinal plants and ecological cycles, passed down through generations. But the outside world, the world of profit, has been coming for this paradise for 500 years. First it was rubber, then timber, then cattle, then soy, and now gold. This is the other side of the Amazonian wild, a wildness of pure greed and human desperation. Illegal mining, the garimpo, has exploded across the Amazon in recent years, a full-scale invasion of constitutionally protected indigenous lands. Thousands of garimpeiros, often hopelessly poor men from other parts of Brazil seeking a desperate lottery ticket, are the foot soldiers of a criminal enterprise. They bring machinery, they bring guns, they bring disease, and they bring mercury. A single horrifying statistic tells the story. It is estimated that for every kilogram of gold extracted, more than a kilogram of toxic liquid mercury is released into the environment to separate the gold from the sediment. That's $1. Kilogram of a luxury good for over $1. Kilogram of a potent neurotoxin. This poison enters the rivers, accumulates in the fish, and travels up the food chain, poisoning the very communities who depend on the river for survival, causing birth defects and neurological damage. The forest is also being consumed by another, even larger fire. The culprit is not just illegal logging. The primary driver of deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon, responsible for as much as 80% of the clearing, is cattle ranching. Vast swaths of irreplaceable primary forest are cut, left to dry, and then burned, all to create low-grade pasture to raise beef, much of it for the global export market. Soy cultivation, for animal feed, follows close behind, finishing the job. The numbers are numbing. During a bad year, an area of the Amazon larger than Belgium can disappear. An irreplaceable world of biodiversity, gone forever, for a hamburger and animal feed. The battle for the Amazon is not hyperbole. It is the battle for the future of the planet, and it is being fought on the ground, village by village, river by river, by indigenous activists, scientists, and public servants who literally risk their lives to stand against the tide. This is the front line of the wildest, most consequential war on Earth. But Brazil's natural wildness is not just the Amazonian green. Travel south, to the geographic center of the continent, and you will find a different, and perhaps even more spectacular, kingdom of water and wildlife. This is the Pantanal, the world's largest tropical wetland. While the Amazon hides its deepest secrets under a dense canopy, the Pantanal is exhibitionist. It puts its staggering wildness on full, glorious display. It's an immense alluvial plain that, for half the year during the rainy season, transforms into a sprawling, shallow inland sea. This seasonal flooding, the pulse of the Pantanal, creates an ecosystem of almost unbelievable richness, a vast aquatic nursery. It is, quite simply, the best place in all the Americas to see wildlife. Here, jaguars, the apex predator of the continent, have become so habituated to the quiet ecotourism boats that they are seen with a frequency unheard of anywhere else, hunting the equally numerous caimans along the riverbanks. Caimans congregate in the thousands, their eyes glowing like embers in the flashlight beam at night. Flocks of jabiru storks and hyacinth macaws paint the sky. Giant otters, capybaras, anacondas, giant anteaters. It is a real-life safari on a scale that beggars belief, a remnant of a prehistoric world. But like the Amazon, this watery paradise is fragile. The 2020s have brought unprecedented challenges. A deadly combination of prolonged climate change-induced drought and human-started fires have led to catastrophic wildfires sweeping across the plains during the dry season. The fires of 2020 in particular were an apocalypse. Nearly a third of the entire biome burned. The images that emerged shocked the world. Charred, desolate landscapes, and the burned bodies of jaguars, tapirs, and monkeys who were not fast enough to escape the flames. It was a stark reminder that even this world of water is not immune to the threats of a changing climate and human carelessness. The wildness of the Pantanal is a spectacle of life, but it now coexists with the specter of death by fire. Yet there is a third, often forgotten Brazilian wilderness. One not of verdant green or shimmering water, but of dust and stone and searing mystical faith. This is the Sertão, the great forgotten heartland of Brazil, the semi-arid backcountry of the Northeast. This is not a place that appears in travel guides. It is a land of profound hardship, of biblical droughts that can last for years, and of a people renowned throughout Brazil for their toughness, their stoicism, their resilience, and their deep, mystical faith. Historically, the Sertão was a land of leather-clad cowboys, the vaqueiros, who developed a unique culture adapted to the thorny caatinga vegetation. It was a land of mystics and social bandits, of prophetic leaders like Antonio Conselheiro, who gathered thousands of followers in remote desert communes like Canudos, which were seen as a threat and brutally crushed by the Republic. To live here is to understand faith in a way that comfortable city dwellers cannot. When your entire existence depends on a rain that may not come, hope becomes a necessary tool for survival. The culture of the Sertão has produced some of Brazil's greatest literature, like Euclides da Cunha's Os Sertões, and its most unique music, art born from a landscape of profound minimalist beauty and unforgiving harshness. It is a spiritual wildness, forged in the crucible of the sun. It teaches a different kind of lesson. Not the overwhelming abundance of the Amazon, or the spectacular display of the Pantanal, but the power of endurance, the stark, stubborn beauty of what survives. These landscapes, the urban, the jungle, the wetland, the desert, are the grand stages upon which the Brazilian drama unfolds. But the true wildness, the untamable, recombinant spirit of the country, is found in the culture that this epic drama has produced. When the world thinks of Brazilian parties, it thinks of one thing: Carnival. The glorious, decadent, world-famous explosion of samba, feathers, and flesh in Rio. And Carnival is magnificent, a rite of catharsis, but it is only one note in a rich symphony of celebration that spans the entire continent-sized country. This is a festa junina. Celebrated throughout Brazil in June, it honors rural life and the corn harvest season. It's a different kind of joy from Carnival, more wholesome, more communal, rooted in the folk traditions of the interior. People dress as farmers and country folk, dance the energetic forró, gather around huge bonfires, drink hot mulled cachaça, and eat corn cakes. It smells of wood smoke and roasting peanuts. It is, in many ways, more authentically and universally Brazilian than the globally televised parade in Rio. This illustrates a fundamental truth. Brazil is not a single culture. It's an archipelago of cultures. The fiercely independent, mate-drinking gaucho culture of the southern plains. The German and Italian-influenced cultures of Santa Catarina, with its Oktoberfest celebrations. The syncretic Amazonian river culture. The fiercely proud Afro-Bahian culture of Salvador, each with its own music, its own food, its own accent, its own way of seeing the world. The wildness of Brazilian culture is in its alchemical ability to absorb everything and create something entirely new. Look at its food. Feijoada, the national dish, a rich, dark, hearty stew of black beans and a variety of salted and smoked pork cuts. A communal meal for Saturday afternoons, shared with family and friends over many hours. Its origins lie in the slave quarters, the senzalas, where unwanted cuts of pork from the master's house were cleverly and resourcefully combined with the humble black bean to create something deeply flavorful and sustaining. It's a dish of survival that has become a national emblem, moqueca, a sublime seafood stew, whose soul is a matter of fierce regional debate between Bahia and Espírito Santo. One version's identity is defined by the African ingredients of dendê palm oil and coconut milk, the others by the indigenous and Portuguese tradition of olive oil and annatto. It's a dish that tells the story of colonization on a single plate. Even the world-famous acai berry is misunderstood. In the West, it's a sweetened, commodified superfood for smoothie bowls, but in its Amazonian home, it's a vital, savory staple food, eaten as a thick, unsweetened, energy-rich purple pulp alongside fried fish or dried meat. A taste of the real acai is a taste of the Amazon itself. But perhaps the most uniquely wild aspect of the Brazilian soul is not something you can see or taste, but something you must feel. It is captured in two famously untranslatable Portuguese words. The first is jeitinho brasileiro, the little Brazilian way. It's a complex, double-edged sword and the key to daily survival. On the surface, it's about finding a way. It's a knack for creative problem-solving, for bending rigid rules, for navigating a world of overwhelming bureaucracy and social obstacles. It's the ingenious, last-minute solution that somehow saves the day. It's the source of Brazil's legendary flexibility and improvisational genius, the ability to make something out of nothing. But it has a dark, corrosive side. It is also the shrug of the shoulders that excuses cutting in line, the knowing wink that accompanies a bribe to a traffic cop, the vast network of favors and cronyism that props up a corrupt political system. It is both a tool for survival for the poor and a tool of impunity for the powerful. It is a moral ambiguity that perplexes outsiders, but is understood by every Brazilian as a simple fact of life. The second word is saudade. This one is more famous, more poetic, but no less profound. It's often lazily translated as nostalgia or longing, but it's more than that. It is the bittersweet, lingering ache for something or someone absent that you love. You can have saudade for a person who is far away, for a place you once loved, for your childhood, or even for a feeling you may never have again. It is the memory of happiness that now brings a pleasant sadness. It is a delicious sorrow. It is the emotional foundation of so much of Brazil's art, particularly its music. From the melancholy chords of bossa nova to the heartbreaking lyrics of a samba classic, it is the profound recognition that beauty is transient, and that there is a kind of sweetness in the longing for what is gone. It is the feeling of an entire nation born from displacement and distance. This blend of creative survivalism, casual corruption, explosive joy, and delicious melancholy is the emotional landscape of Brazil. A country that dances with tears in its eyes. A country where the wildest, most unpredictable terrain of all is the human heart. So where does this impossibly complex nation go from here? What is the future of Brazil's wildness in 2025 and beyond? The story of modern Brazil is a roller coaster, one of dizzying highs and crushing lows. In the early 2000s, it was the darling of the developing world, the bee in bricks. A booming commodities-fueled economy lifted tens of millions of people out of poverty in one of the most successful poverty reduction programs in modern history. It was a nation brimming with confidence, hosting the World Cup and the Olympics, seemingly ready to take its seat at the global table as a major power. Then came the fall, sudden and brutal. A devastating economic crisis was compounded by the revelation of Lava Jato, Operation Car Wash, a colossal political corruption scandal centered on the state oil company Petrobras. It was a scheme of such breathtaking scale, involving billions of dollars in bribes paid to politicians and executives from virtually all major parties, that it delegitimized the entire political class and plunged the country into a period of intense political polarization that has split families, friendships, and the nation itself in two. The country is still grappling with the fallout. Economic inequality, which had been narrowing for a decade, is widening again at an alarming rate. The political divisions are deep and bitter, and the existential threats to its natural treasures, the Amazon and the Pantanal, are more acute than ever, with enforcement policies in constant flux. It would be easy to look at Brazil in 2025 and see only trouble. To see a nation struggling, perhaps failing to live up to its own immense God-given potential. But that would be, once again, to miss the story, because the same quiet resilience that built the favelas, the same creative rebellion that invented capoeira, the same stubborn endurance that survives the sertão, is at work today, shaping the country's turbulent future. The wildness of Brazil's future is in its innovation, often born from necessity. It is a world leader in biofuel technology. Its digital banking and fintech sector is one of the most dynamic on the planet, using mobile technology to bring millions of previously unbanked citizens into the formal economy. A quiet revolution happening in the palm of one's hand. It is home to world-class research centers and innovative companies like Embraer, a leading global aircraft manufacturer. It's in the social activism that bubbles up relentlessly from the grassroots. The community organizers in the favelas creating their own solar grids and social enterprises. The swelling ranks of indigenous activists and Black feminist thinkers using social media and political office to challenge the old power structures. The musicians and artists who continue to process the nation's trauma and joy into startlingly original new forms, speaking truth to power. The challenges are immense. No one in Brazil would deny that. The fight against endemic poverty, systemic corruption, deep-seated racism, and catastrophic environmental destruction is a generational struggle, with frequent, painful setbacks. But Brazil's greatest resource has never been its iron ore, its soybeans, or even its deep-sea oil. It has always been its people, their infinite, almost maddening capacity to find joy in the face of hardship, to create community in the absence of the state, to dance, to sing, to believe, to endure, to improvise. So, is Brazil the most wild country in 2025? If by wild you mean dangerous, chaotic, and broken, then you have only seen the feather and mistaken it for the bird. You have not been paying attention. But if by wild you mean a place that refuses to be tamed, that defies easy definition, that operates on a logic of its own, a logic of heart and rhythm and survival, if you mean a place where the past is never past, where different centuries coexist on the same street, where life erupts in the most unlikely of cracks in the concrete, where the human spirit is forged and reforged daily in a crucible of staggering beauty and heartbreaking injustice, if you mean a place that can contain the silent, primordial Amazon and the roaring chaos of São Paulo, the ancient faith of candomblé and cutting-edge fintech startups, soul-crushing inequality, and the most infectious, life-affirming joy on earth, all at the same time, within the same borders. Then yes, Brazil is, and perhaps always will be, the wildest, most contradictory, most exasperating, most heartbreakingly beautiful country on the planet. It's a nation that doesn't ask for you to understand it. It knows that is impossible. It only asks that you feel it.